Have the San Francisco 49ers seen their Super Bowl window close before they could finish the deal? What's going on, everybody? Good Monday morning. It is Victory Monday, and it's better than a typical Victory Monday. Victory Monday, sometimes you beat a team from the AFC where you love the win, but it's over an AFC team. It doesn't hit quite the same as a typical win, and you're like, okay, that's not really going to help us in tiebreakers. Sometimes for Victory Monday, you've just beaten a team in the NFC, and that's nice. But you're also like, okay, that may not be as impactful at the end of the season because it's a team from the NFC South or the NFC East. No, these are the best Victory Mondays, the ones that come over the NFC West, your division rivals. So we're feeling good today. But to start off our week here, we're not going to talk about the Seattle Seahawks so much in this video. We're going to talk about a rival of the Seattle Seahawks. And I don't think I need to explain to anybody why this relates to the Seattle Seahawks. This is a team we play twice a year. This is a team that we compete with every year for positioning and seeding. So it should be very clear to everybody why what the 49ers do affects the Seattle Seahawks. So with that being said, we got to talk about these San Francisco 49ers because it feels like we're getting to the end of the story here. And I don't just mean the story of the 2024 San Francisco 49ers. I mean the story of the San Francisco 49ers under this Kyle Shanahan, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa era of football just in general. Before I go any further, though, I hope you like this video. If you do, please click the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Click the bell for notifications. Become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to help support the channel. So obviously, yesterday, the 49ers lost by 4 touchdowns in Green Bay, and that's going to be the main thing on people's minds when they think about the Niners at this moment. But honestly, this game was kind of over before it started because the Niners are so beat up. They didn't have their quarterback. They didn't have Bosa. They didn't have their star left tackle. Like, they never really had much of a chance. This game was over before kickoff. Really, the death blow came last week at the hands of the Seattle Seahawks, but the death blow was landed. And maybe at the time, Niners fans didn't realize it was the death blow. But when the Seattle Seahawks pulled that come-from-behind victory out, and when they, in the process, took out Brock Purdy and Bosa, it put them on this path. And now they're here, and this season's pretty clearly slipping away. So just to quickly talk about that part of it, although we've done this recently, we did this last week, just so we understand where things are. The 49ers are currently 5-6. They are in last place in the division, literally 4th place. And you look at their remaining schedule, they've got at Buffalo next week, basically a guaranteed loss. They may not have Purdy, they may not have Bosa, they may not have Williams. Like, even if they get those players back, they're going to be underdogs. They're going to have a lot to overcome to even be competitive in that game. Then you've got the Bears, and the Bears aren't good, but they're not terrible. And the 49ers have already lost some games to some more middling teams this year. So, I mean, it's probably a win, but not if they don't have their players. Then they got the Rams, and, I mean, the Rams are okay. The Rams are a decent team. They're competitive. The Dolphins have been playing a lot better ever since Tua got back. That is not a free win, especially on the road. And then you got the Lions. That's probably a game that you're just kind of showing up to get smacked around in, if we're being honest. And they still got one more game against the Cardinals, and we'll see what position the Cardinals are in at that point in time. But the Cardinals have already beaten the Niners once this year, so you certainly wouldn't scratch that up as an easy win or a cheap win or anything like that. So they don't have any real gimmies. Maybe the Bears game is a little bit of a gimme, but You do the math, and it's really hard to imagine this Niners team ending with even a winning record. They look like an 8-win team, and that might be a little bit optimistic. So this season kind of feels like it's done. The Niners are going to have to get incredibly hot over these next few weeks, and they're going to have to do it quite possibly without some of their most important players. So this season feels like it's kind of a wrap. But we're not just talking about this season with these Niners. It's about this window, the Super Bowl window that opened really in 2019. 2019 was the year the Niners started playing at a high level. They made the Super Bowl. Next year, they had a bunch of injuries. They bottomed out a little bit. Bad year. Year after that, they made the NFC title game. Year after that, they make the NFC title game. Year after that, they make the Super Bowl. Still haven't finished the job, but the window remained open. And now, as they come to the end of what looks like will be a failure of a season where the Niners don't win enough games to make the playoffs, but don't lose enough games to get a high draft pick, we got to ask, how much does this window have left to give? Because you go through this Niners roster, it's one of the best rosters in football, but how much longer is that going to be the case? Just to briefly go through the situation that they find themselves in going into 2025, Trent Williams, he is going to turn 37 in July. So before the next season starts, he will turn 37. This is a guy who has played a lot of football in his career. He will almost be at 200 career games by the time this season is over. This is a guy who's made Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl. This is a guy who's been an All-Pro the last 3 years. This is a guy who has put a lot of miles on his body over the last decade and a half. This is a guy who held out this offseason for a redone contract, possibly so that he would have the opportunity to retire after 2024 and still claim a lot of money, like Aaron Donald did. This is what Aaron Donald did to the Rams. He held retirement over their head, got them to redo his contract so he would get big guarantees, and then a year later he retired and still collected his money. Trent Williams kind of in the same position here. And if Trent Williams has the sense that 2025 is not going to be a good year for the Niners, is he really going to stick around and play football at 37 years old? Wouldn't he just retire and collect all his money at that point? Probably. So this is a guy who, even if he comes back, how much longer can he do this? He might be the best left tackle in the league over the last few years. He is the cornerstone of the Niners' offense in many ways. They have great other players on that team, don't get me wrong, but Trent Williams might be their best guy. And even if he comes back, is he going to be able to play at that level for another year? The odds are against him. Kyle Juszczyk. I know, he's a fullback, but he's an important part of what they do, and he's going to turn 34 before the draft. How much longer can he do this? This is a guy who's played over a decade in this league. This is a guy who's made Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl, played. By the end of this year, he'll be at about 190 career games played in. This is a guy who's built up some serious miles. This is a guy who's done a lot in this league. Is he going to be sticking around for another season, especially if things look a little shaky? And how do you replace a guy like this? There are not a lot of Kyle Juszczyks in the NFL. Kyle Juszczyks are rare. In fact, he's kind of one of one. He's the last truly impactful fullback in the sport. And once he's gone, he's probably gone. And obviously, he's still a fullback. You can live without him. But there are some things that the Niners do, because they have Juszczyk, that make them more dynamic than other teams. And once he's gone, he's gone. Even a guy, Jake Brendel. Now, Jake Brendel's not a great player, but we're talking about a guy who started every game and played every snap for them this year, and he's played a lot of football for them the last few years at center. He's going to turn 33 before the next regular season starts, in all likelihood. He turns 33 next September. So this is starting to become a real concern for them. Now, there's not a ton of miles on him. He's only played 81 games in his career. He had a little bit of a late start. He took a couple years off. He does have some things working in his favor, but this is not a very good player to begin with. This is a middling player. So he slips a little bit. He goes from middling to just kind of bad. This might not even be a guy you want to keep around beyond this season, just for that reason. You got a guy like a Leonard Floyd, who was one of the guys they brought in to try to stretch their window out into 2024, and he's been okay, but I don't think they've gotten what they were hoping to out of him. He's going to turn 33 before the season starts next year as well. Right? Probably just a couple days before the season starts, but he's going to be 33 before he plays football in 2025 again. Is he going to actually go out there and play? Is he looking to maybe retire after this season? I think next year is the last year of his deal. Is he going to play for the Niners? Does he want to go to a team that's actually looking like they could be a contender? Leonard Floyd is a guy who over the last few years of his career has mostly played on contending teams. If he feels like the Niners are not going to be able to do that in 2025, would he ask to move on? Would he even want to come back? It's an interesting question. By the end of this year, he'll have played in about 130, almost 140 games in his NFL career. And you look at something like that, and you just wonder, he's already starting to slip a little bit. He's been decent this year. I don't think he's been bad, but you're not looking at this and going, yeah, I feel really good about Leonard Floyd being an impact player for any team next year, including the Niners. He's not that impactful this year. He's been fine. So you're probably losing something here. You might be losing him entirely. And you keep going down the line here. Got a guy like John Feliciano, who admittedly is a reserve. He's somebody who comes off the bench and is kind of a utility player. But he is going to turn 33 around the Super Bowl. So this is another guy who you have leaned on at least somewhat. He has played a decent amount of football in his career. He signed with the Niners last year. They actually used him on almost 500 offensive snaps. And now he's in a situation where he might be looking to retire in the offseason. He might be looking to leave the Niners in the offseason. The Niners might even look at him and go, hey, at 33 years old and already having been injured this season, they might be looking to just move off of him because. But you still have to replace the guy. They may not have the replacement in place, and they may not be able to find the replacement next offseason. Devondre Campbell, admittedly, this is a guy they brought on because of the Dre Greenlaw injury, so they're hoping they won't need him next year. He's going to turn 32 this offseason, though. If there was any hope or expectation of having Devondre Campbell on the team in 2025, you have to wonder about him slipping as a player. And this year, so far, he's been okay. I don't think he's been anything remarkable. I think that there has been a clear drop-off from what you were getting with Greenlaw to what you're getting from Campbell. And if that slippage continues into 2025, that may not even be a guy that you really want. George Kittle. This is a big one right here because George Kittle has been huge for this 49ers team. He's 31 now. Going to turn 32 early in the season next year, which is not that old, but you got to look at the way this guy plays football. George Kittle plays football in a way that is clearly going to result in a shorter than typical career. And we've already seen, he has a hard time making it through a full season. He usually misses a few games. Once he's missed about half the season in 2020. So this is not a guy you want to bet on producing deep into his 30s. And his production this year was excellent. He was on pace to have a 1,000-yard season pretty easily before he got hurt. Now he may not. But Kittle, they leaned on him heavily just to gut out the wins that they have this year. And you look at this, and you look at just common sense and logic and reason. You consider the fact that he's already battling through injuries constantly. And you're kind of forced to conclude that this is not a guy that the Niners are going to be able to really depend on going forward. And I imagine they're going to bring him back next year because they're going to have to, and they're just going to cross their fingers. But will it work? Javon Hargrave, going to turn 32 this offseason, and he suffered a major injury this season. He hasn't necessarily been the player that they were hoping for when they signed him from the Philadelphia Eagles. He was good last year, but doesn't really look like that kind of a star player anymore. And this year only played 3 games, suffered a big time injury. What is he going to have left? Can you bring that guy back? Can he justify his cap hit in 2025? And even if he can you afford that cap hit? Probably, but at the same time, this guy, I mean, he produced big time in Philadelphia in 2022 as part of one of the deepest, most effective pass rushes in NFL history. You take him away from that, he's good. He's not the same. And now he's a year older. Again, he's going to turn 32 around the Super Bowl. And he's coming off this big injury. Christian McCaffrey. This is a big one right here. Now, he's not that old, right? He's going to turn 29 in June. But for a running back, that's that's not really something that you're looking forward to, right? Especially when you've already played it'll end up being about 100 games in your career, and you've touched the ball, almost 2,000 times in your career with receptions plus attempts. He's going to be around 2,000 by the end of this season, and the snap counts have just been through the roof. I mean, we all know how Carolina ran this guy into the ground when he was there, and the Niners have also been kind of riding him pretty hard. So he gets to the end of this season, he's played over 5,000 NFL snaps as a running back, or I guess wide receiver. Regardless, he already had a major injury this year. He's barely played. He hasn't looked that good when he's played. He's been, he doesn't look like an all-pro or a Pro Bowler at all. He just looks like a guy. He just looks like another running back right now, and maybe he'll get his elite ability back as this season goes on. But do you really want to bet on Christian McCaffrey being a big-time guy in 2025? That sounds like a losing bet to me. And Deebo Samuel, he's going to turn 29 in January, which, again, not that bad. But the way Deebo Samuel plays, like George Kittle, you knew he was going to have a shortened career. You knew that he was not going to be able to have one of these 15 to 20-year careers. He may end up playing like a 10-year career, with the last couple years of that career being not really that effective overall. I mean, you look at these numbers, you look at the way he's fallen off in 2024, you watch him play, you see he's lost his burst. You know that the Niners use him as kind of a surrogate running back sometimes. They do a lot of stuff with him, handing him the ball. That has added miles and miles to him as a player. That has put a lot extra on his plate. And again, it's added up to the point where I don't know if you can depend on this guy being a particularly good player in 2025. There's talk they might cut him. There's talk they might move off of him. He's already on track to have a pretty disappointing year this year. He hasn't had a 1,000-yard year since his All-Pro year in 2021. So what is Deebo Samuel going forward? And you go to the free agent list. You got Charvarius Ward. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. That could be dicey. You don't really want to lose him, but you might not want to pay him either. He's about to be 30. Dre Greenlaw's a free agent. You got to make a decision there, and you may be making that decision with minimal information. It's not that bad, though, admittedly. You look at this list, and you're like, okay, there's not a lot here that will be hard to replace. Like Hufanga has fallen off. I don't know if the Niners are that excited about keeping him beyond 2024, and they can probably bring him back for relatively cheap and not lean on him too heavily. And the Niners do have some good young players. Of course, those good young players either need to get paid or just got paid. They're going to get Ayuk back, but they already gave him a ton of money. Who knows how long it'll take for him to come back from that injury. Purdy's going to have to get paid. And look, Purdy's a good quarterback. Purdy's proven that he's more than just a complete product of the system, but he's going to get overpaid this offseason. He's going to get paid like he's the best quarterback in the league when he's not. They have guys like Jawan Jennings. He's good, and I think they get him cheap for another year or two. Or at the very least, the extension doesn't have to be killer for a couple of years when they give it to him. So that's okay. Jordan Mason, relatively young, I guess. Not too hard to keep him around for a while and feel pretty decent about it. Bosa is still relatively young. Fred Warner's in his prime. You can probably count on Fred Warner being a good player for a few more years. They just gave a bunch of money to Lenore. And Lenore, I mean, I don't know if I would have given him that kind of money, but he is a pretty good player. And he is young, so you should be able to lean on him for a while. So there is some stuff going on here. They can replace some of these older outgoing players with new players, but the odds of you being able to do it all at once, it's stacked against you. And then we get to kind of the biggest elephant in the room here. Things are kind of turning against Kyle Shanahan. And look, I don't want to lean on Grant Cohn as some kind of completely objective voice here. Grant Cohn has never been a big Kyle Shanahan guy. He's always been very critical of Kyle Shanahan. I know that. And I think anybody in the comment section should be aware. I'm not saying that Grant Cohn said it, so therefore it's the case. But there is some momentum here around the idea of Kyle Shanahan not being the Niners head coach next year, assuming they miss the playoffs, which right now seems very likely. This is a tweet Cohn made right after the Seahawks 49ers game last week. Now, since that game, the Niners have gotten blown off the field against Green Bay. Now, Grant Cohn is not a big Shanahan guy. I think we know that. But he's not one of these chuckleheads on X who has like 13 followers, who has the Twitter, the X handle of Fire Kyle Shanahan, and all they tweet about after every game is, we didn't score a touchdown on every single play, so therefore we have to fire Kyle Shanahan, or we didn't score 100 points today, we didn't get 8 pick sixes, Brock Purdy didn't throw for 3,000 yards today, so fire Kyle Shanahan. There are people like that. They don't matter. They don't know anything. They don't know what they're doing. I'm not talking about those people. But there is starting to be a voice in the Niners fandom that is at least a little bit rational. People who actually think about things, people who actually use their brain, that are starting to think along this line. That maybe Shanahan has seen his best, and it wasn't quite enough, and the Niners would be best served to move on. Now, I want to be clear, I don't think that would be a good idea for the Niners to do it all. I am throwing a party here in my room the day the Niners fire Kyle Shanahan. So, if I'm a Niners fan, this is the last thing that I want to do, but it's starting to feel like there's at least a little bit of energy here. And from my perspective, as a guy who thinks Kyle Shanahan is a very good coach, you lose Shanahan, you lose a lot of your ability to replace some of these outgoing players, like a George Kittle, like a Christian McCaffrey, like a Deebo Samuel, like a Trent Williams, because Shanahan gets the most out of those guys, and you're really losing your ability to get the most out of a guy like Brock Purdy, just as you're about to pay him maybe $60 million a year. So, from my perspective, it's a complete disaster, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. This owner, Jed York, has already proven that he is willing to fire a very successful coach. He fired Jim Harbaugh after one average season, after 3 straight NFC Conference Championship appearances. So, he's done it before. Now, it's possible that Jed York is sitting there and he's thinking, of course I'm not going to fire Kyle Shanahan. What am I, stupid? I'm not even thinking about it. And if he's smart, I think that he is probably sitting there thinking, every year the team is relatively healthy, we at least make the NFC title game. Why would I fire that? And if somebody asked him if he's thinking about firing Shanahan, he would just laugh him out of the room. That's possible. you look at Shanahan after this game. If you looked at him in the post-game press conference yesterday, he looked a little defeated. He sounded a little defeated. He looks a little out of it. There is some possibility that he's losing the locker room as well. And if these things start happening, then the argument becomes compelling. If he loses the locker room and the players are just kind of out on him, you might have to. And if that's what's going on here, then even I would have to acknowledge that, hey, you got to do what you have to. You got to do what you got to do. If the players are out, then it's really hard to get them back. You get them back by getting them a new coach. So the ability to reopen the window would, in my opinion, as a pro Shanahan guy, be drastically limited if they lose Shanahan, because the level of talent on this team is probably about to start to go way down, and their ability to replace that talent is going to be somewhat limited by the fact that Brock Purdy's about to become one of the wealthiest, highest earning quarterbacks out there. Now, I think that the solution here for the Niners is very simple. You hire a GM to replace you fire John Lynch, you bring in a real GM. If Shanahan has personnel control, and apparently he does, you strip it away from him, give it to the new GM, and you let Shanahan focus on being a head coach, which I think he's very good at, and you let the new GM focus on being a GM, and hopefully he's good at that, and you try to replace this outgoing talent. But even if you do that, how are you going to replace players who are this good? Trent Williams should be a future Hall of Famer. George Kittle should be a future Hall of Famer. Christian McCaffrey, I think, will make the Hall of Fame. How are you going to replace these guys? You can't realistically expect to do it. So it's feeling like the window is closed. It feels like this year was the last chance, and it's just blown up. And this video has been way too long. This video has gone on much longer than I thought it would, but we needed to spend some time on this one, because if the Niners window closes and you're looking at the 49ers being coached by Robert Saleh next year, and I like Robert Saleh, but he's not going to get the most out of this roster the way Shanahan was, at least not offensively. And you've got Brock Purdy on a $60 million a year contract, throwing the ball to Cameron Latu and Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall, and getting protected by Aaron Banks and some brand new left tackle who's probably a rookie. And their defense is trying to figure out if Dre Greenlaw's back or not on the fly. And you don't have Juszczyk as a little bit of a safety valve, somebody who can really throw stuff at other teams that no other player in the league can. And Hargrave comes back and he can't get pushed in the middle anymore. You're talking about a pretty mediocre team. You're talking about a 7 to 8 win team probably. So the window seems like, yeah, I think we're here. I think we can now say that this San Francisco 49er team, I think the window has shut. This was, they tried to pry it open for one more year by getting guys like Leonard Floyd, Devondre Campbell, and moving stuff around so they could keep guys like Debo and Kittle and extending McCaffrey. And they tried, but it didn't work for an assortment of reasons. Injuries are a big problem, so that stuff you can't really control. But regardless, I don't see how you pry it open for one more year. You're going to be trying to replace elite players. You're going to be trying to live with your formerly elite players becoming just decent players. You're going to have good players who regress to just being average players. And you can't replace all that in one off season. So let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. 30-minute video. Been a while since I made a video this long, I feel like, but I wanted to get into this a little bit here, because if the Niners go away for the next couple of years, especially if they're foolish enough to fire Kyle Shanahan, which I still think would be a very bad move, that clears the way for the Seahawks, because the situation with the Rams, it's different, but there are some similarities as well. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks.